So, in my last video I talked about one thing that I disliked from each Assassin's Creed game, and it was pretty interesting to see a lot of your guys' comments giving your opinions on what you disliked about one thing in an Assassin's Creed game too. But now it's time to do the complete opposite and talk about one thing that I loved from each game. This will focus on what I truly adored the most about one specific thing. So yeah, this should be a lot easier to do as the positives do definitely outweigh the negatives in the series. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So starting off with Assassin's Creed 1, a game that I like a lot. I've mentioned quite a few times in previous videos that even though this game was released in 2007, it still kinda holds up well. But if I was to pick one single thing that I loved the most about Assassin's Creed 1, I'd have to go with the atmosphere of the time period. The Third Crusade in 1191 was portrayed pretty well by Ubisoft. The cities of Acre, Jerusalem and Damascus are all rendered with some pretty good detail. Each city has its own unique atmosphere. You see, Acre is a crowded port city, Jerusalem is a holy city, and Damascus feels like an actual metropolis. But it's not just the visuals and gameplay that makes that atmosphere so good, it's also the soundtrack. Assassin's Creed 1, in my opinion, has one of the best soundtracks in the entire series, and no matter what situation Altair was in, the game always played the right theme of music. So yeah, that's what I love the most about Assassin's Creed 1. I could have been boring and said the thing that I love the most about this game would be that it's the first game and it started it all, but that's just a cop-out answer. Now for Assassin's Creed 2, a game that I enjoyed quite a lot back when it was released, mainly because of how much it was an upgrade to Assassin's Creed 1. But if I was to choose one particular thing that I loved from Assassin's Creed 2, I'm gonna have to go with the most common answer, which is Ezio. Now I'm sorry, I know, there's quite a few people that are not fans of Ezio, but here's the thing, when I think of the game Assassin's Creed, my mind immediately goes to Ezio. He practically set the blueprint for Assassin's Creed, and when you think of this game, the most memorable thing is Ezio. Imagine the series if he did not exist. It would definitely not be as popular as it is today. In fact, Ezio is the only assassin in the entire series that has his own trilogy of games. Now, of course, that's a whole debate for another time on who else deserves a trilogy, but for me, Ezio was the thing I loved the most about Assassin's Creed 2. Now for Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, the second game featuring Ezio. This is a game that I enjoyed quite a lot back when I was a child, and there's a lot of things in the game that I could pick as my favourite. I could have gone with perhaps the most common answer, which is Rome in general, but if I had to pick one, it would probably be the side content. Out of every single Ezio game, I found Brotherhood to have by far the best side content in the game. The best thing about the side content in Brotherhood is that it felt like there was an incentive to actually do them before you got to the ending of the game. There was so much variety for the side quests in Brotherhood. You got the Leonardo machines, the Borgia towers, faction missions, Templar targets, Romulus lairs, and there's quite a few more. These side quests took up a lot of my playtime and I don't really regret doing these, especially the Leonardo machines. I know that there's some people that dislike these and I can see where they're coming from, but I quite enjoyed them. It was definitely a unique thing in Assassin's Creed, which took us to some pretty unique areas on the map. So yeah, my favourite thing about Brotherhood is definitely the side content. The third and final game for Ezio, and that's Assassin's Creed Revelations. This game was more of a send-off rather than anything new. I do like the introduction of the hook blade that Revelations introduced, and also the city of Constantinople, but that's not what my favourite thing about this game was. Now my favourite thing was the story and how it all ended. And that's also including the modern day parts too, because I thought the modern day in this game was pretty good. The send-off story for Ezio was great, but I also have to include the Altair parts at the end. It had some of my most memorable moments in the series, like Altair coming back to Masyaf, Ezio meeting Desmond and seeing Altair in the vault. The ending was not only a great ending for Ezio, but it also gave Altair's life much more meaning. It elevated Altair from a generic, nearly silent protagonist in the very first game to a more developed character who basically created the entire series. Now for Assassin's Creed 3, a game that in my opinion has quite a few good and bad things about it. There's actually quite a lot of positives and some pretty good ones at that. The thing I love the most about Assassin's Creed 3 would definitely have to be the homestead missions. These missions allow you to help Connor build up his homestead in the frontier, and they also help you learn more about his character. Now that I think about it, I do admit that I'm a little harsh on the analysis of Connor as a character. You see, back when I first played Assassin's Creed 3 on the PS3, I didn't really try these homestead missions, and I didn't really realize how immersive it would make the atmosphere of the game feel. But when I did play them a few months ago, I did enjoy them quite a lot. It just sucks that to witness Connor's actual personality truly shine, it would have to be through the side stuff in the game, and not the main story. I didn't really expect to see a more personality driven side of Connor through these homestead missions, but it was 100% worth it. Now for Assassin's Creed Black Flag, a game that completely shifted from ordinary assassins to an actual pirate transforming into an assassin. You see, Black Flag is one of my favourite games in the series, and there's just so much positives about it. I even made this video where I just praised the game. But if I had to say one singular thing that I love the most about this game, I'd have to say just being a pirate and doing pirate things, such as sailing the ocean, naval combat, and just having your crew sing sea shanties. Everything about sailing the ocean as a pirate was amazing in Black Flag. The naval combat in the game is some of the best I've ever played, and is peak ocean gameplay in Assassin's Creed. Even though we've seen naval combat in other Assassin's Creed games after Black Flag, they didn't quite do it like Black Flag did. With Assassin's Creed 3, the naval experience wasn't quite there. That was until Black Flag came along, polished it up, and made it into such a great experience for sailing the seas. It was also such an entertaining story, especially seeing the way Edward goes from a straight up pirate with typical pirate ambitions to a more developed character that we all truly love in the end. So yeah, that's my favourite thing about Black Flag. Pirates. Oh boy, Assassin's Creed Rogue. Now this game to me just feels like a DLC for Black Flag, but despite it containing the exact same assets and mechanics as Black Flag, it does actually have some pretty good things about it. The one thing I love the most about this game is the fact that we're able to witness the entire game through the eyes of a Templar, and also witness a complete shift in narrative. You see, the main character being Shay Cormac is a very different character, and one that nobody expected. We did get to play as a Templar before in Assassin's Creed 3, but that was only at the start. In Rogue, we witnessed that Templars are not simply one-dimensional villains with just unrealistic or evil intentions. Similar to the Assassins, they actually have a noble purpose, and somewhat have principles. So yeah, I did enjoy the Templar point of view quite a fair amount in Rogue, and that's what my favourite part about this game was. Now for Assassin's Creed Unity, and the very first game of the at the time next generation consoles. This game was a true step up in just everything, mechanics, graphics and overall gameplay from Rogue. But the one main thing I love the most about Assassin's Creed Unity has to definitely be the parkour. I mean, how could it not? The parkour in this game was simply perfect and is by far the best in the series. You can leap between buildings and effortlessly run across rooftops with flair. The parkour that you did not feel repetitive at all, and the overall movement felt ridiculously smooth. Whenever I browse YouTube and I see an Assassin's Creed parkour video, I can bet my life that the game in that video is Assassin's Creed Unity, and it's not hard to see why. I'm starting to see a lot of people recently say that Unity's parkour is overrated, and I feel like people are just saying that for zero reason at all. It's like a football player. That player could be amazing and everybody in the world knows it, but years later, suddenly people will just start to call him overrated for no reason at all, simply because it's the quote-unquote cool thing to do. So yeah, Unity's parkour for me is by far my favourite thing in the game. A close second would be the setting of Paris, but it doesn't quite get me as much as the parkour does. Assassin's Creed Syndicate to me was a game that was pretty much underrated. This game wasn't really widely loved by a lot of people for many reasons, but to me there was quite a decent amount of things that made the game pretty good. and if I had to pick one, I'd go with something that most people wouldn't think of, and that is the historical figures throughout the game. The game allows you to interact with some of the most famous historical figures of the Victorian era, including Charles Dickens, Karl Marx, Florence Nightingale, Queen Victoria and Alexander Graham Bell. Now, being from England, this was quite interesting to me because when I was in school, I remember learning about a lot of these figures, and to see Ubisoft implement them in Assassin's Creed Syndicate is pretty cool to me. You see, while Syndicate may not represent these figures as historically as possible, just seeing them implemented into the game was a nice touch. It's not even just the historical figures being in the game. Ubisoft also did a pretty good job capturing the accuracy of the Victorian era with child slaves, factories and carriages, and even the depiction of Big Ben. It was all pretty much spot on. The missions with these historical figures was also a nice touch. Being able to have these little story missions with famous historical figures was really fun. It was definitely different, but I enjoyed them a lot. This one for me is going to be a no-brainer. I've mentioned many times that Assassin's Creed Origins is my favourite game in the series. There's quite a lot of positives that I can mention for this one, such as Bayek being a great protagonist, or even the story just being very good. But the main one I simply have to focus on is the setting of ancient Egypt. From the Great Pyramids just rising out the sands to the unique wildlife, Origins setting is what made me love this game so much. The sheer accuracy and size of ancient Egypt was depicted pretty well. I remember before this game came out, the setting of ancient Egypt was one that was the most requested among the fanbase, and when it was realized, it did not let down at all. The NPCs in the world breathe life into the game. The sand alone is just great to walk across, the water is stunning, and the cities and towns are filled with remarkable details, such as statues, markets and architecture. There's also the tombs and caves throughout ancient Egypt that Ubisoft did a great job of detailing. So yeah, my favourite part of Assassin's Creed Origins is the setting. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is a game that's not everybody's cup of tea. It gets a lot of stick for it not being an Assassin's Creed game, but for me I really enjoyed it, even though the story did sometimes go a little off track. It still kept me engaged from start to finish, and just like Origins, there's so many things I could say are my favourite about this game, but the one I'm going to go with is the cult of Cosmos, and just hunting them down throughout the world of ancient Greece. One of the things that I love the most about the cult of Cosmos is the mystery that surrounds them. We only learnt about them slowly over the course of the game, and throughout the whole game I was kept pretty engaged. Oh, and I'm not including the cultist leader reveal as part of this. That part was straight garbage to me. Anyway, just hunting these cultists throughout the world, finding clues about another cultist and then actually assassinating them was a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, the system is not flawless at all. There's still space for improvement, but it would be great to have additional choices for engaging with the target beyond straightforwardly eliminating them. Maybe the option to interrogate them or even capture them, just like in Metal Gear Solid, or even turn them into spies, just like from Shadow of Mordor. Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I keep using the term wasted potential to describe this game. However, despite the flaws that it may have, I do think there's some great things in the game that I liked. The one I'm going to go with is a rather weird one, and that is the mutilations in the game. Now, if you don't know what the word mutilations means, I'm referring to the brutality of the combat in the game. I'll be honest, Ubisoft did a ridiculously good job of portraying Vikings in Valhalla. We all know them as brutal warriors, and the game did not let down in that aspect. The intense combat in the game perfectly suits the Viking era and how brutal it was. Then there's the addition of a stamina bar, which adds strategy and depth to the battles. I did like this feature because it got rid of the repetitive button spamming and mindless combat that we've had in previous games. Anyway, back to the mutilations. One thing that really bothered me in Odyssey was that there was no decapitations, despite wielding massive two-handed axes that would quite literally strike enemies in the head. However, in Valhalla, it appears that decapitations are possible with pretty much every weapon, including shields. I absolutely love this addition, and this is what makes the combat so brutal in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So there you have it. One thing I love the most about every mainline Assassin's Creed game. I had a lot of choices to go with in many different games for my favourite thing, but the ones I've mentioned in this video are ultimately what I've decided on. If you haven't seen the previous video where I named one thing I disliked, I 100% recommend watching that to see some spicy picks. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, you can help me out by just simply clicking that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.